advised me yesterday, actually, that she is otherwise occupied at this time. So I'm going to keep going on as long as I can here in case I run out of energy or whatever else. It's after 1 o'clock now, so let's call the meeting to order. Any comments or changes, deletions from the agenda?
Not by me.
Okay, the agenda is pretty basic anyway. We have two meeting minutes for approval. One's the February 25th meeting, and the other was the March 4th meeting. The February 25th meeting was the one that ran about 4 hours or 4 hours plus. I don't remember it now. March was the one that was basically a special meeting that dealt only with the owner of record proposal going to the referendum. I did not make up very detailed minutes on those meetings. I didn't think it was particularly necessary. The minutes of the fourth meeting, March 4th meeting, are longer.
Thank you.
Both meetings are on video anyway, so they're basically short for the record kind of meetings. So anybody want to make any changes, additions, deletions from the minutes?
I make a motion to approve them as written.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. I'll say all in favor, please. Well, any discussion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all in favor, aye. Aye here. I'll take it to be unanimous. Other than us, I don't see anybody here for public comments. So let's go right on into the new business, or the real part of the meeting today, and that's to review the status that we have on our resolutions, and that's was been sent maybe a week and a half or so ago and included with the meeting material minutes for a day. It consists of the status that, particularly open status situations that Bob identified, and some comments that I inserted on my own. What I'd like to approach these open, or not open, but resolutions for review, whether now or in the future, and to a certain extent what we've done in the past, is if instead of just sending out to some point, the board of directors, a committee, whatever, for it to be reviewed, if we see anything in the current revision, or current revision of the resolution, I am having trouble tracking a little bit once in a while. We ought to make a comment on that, or remark on that, or point out something that may need to be reviewed, other than just leave it out there for the recipients to perhaps search, or perhaps not search for things themselves. So that's the reason why those comments are out there. And I also, in the material email, I put in there what I thought would be a priority to start on, not knowing just how far we would go in this meeting. We could get through this in 30 minutes, all the way through everything that's on that list of meeting review, or we could be here for another 4 hours and still not finish. So I did put together a priority to start with. To start off with, I want to be able to kind of remove one from the list. It turns out that F01 has been reviewed. It's been reviewed sometime in the past, and I'm not sure how I missed the comments that came back from the Budget and Finance Committee. But that committee, back in May of last year, in other words, a year ago, did review several resolutions, including F01. and went forward with some proposals on a couple, 2 or 3 resolutions, which indeed made it to the board. One resulted in a change and another didn't. And that's, I think Bob has updated our governor's document spreadsheet to that, to indicate that. But what was missed, and I don't know why or how, but it would have been me, their comment that they had reviewed F01, the investment guidelines resolution, and did not have any changes to make with it. And that review included the then and current treasurer, Doug Parks. So everybody who needed to really review that, it may not have been reviewed fully at the board, but I think that the Budget and Finance Committee review and the trade with the treasurer is sufficient to consider that resolution reviewed as of May 2021, and we can advance it on out to our, I think it's probably 2-year date. So that's to kind of start this off with maybe an easy one, if I can put it that way. The first on the priority list that I put out was the M01 resolution, which is the I call it compliance resolution for short. And what I'd like to do is just briefly go over my own comments and why, and step back and give everybody a chance to make their own comments before we decide what we want to do. I think it's necessary to send it out for review, but what all we need to do in making comments. I point out two paragraphs in the resolution that I think need to be reviewed, and that's the paragraph 6, step 4, step at the ARC review, and then further on paragraph 7, where it deals with what the general manager does with the resolution. It also should include paragraph 6. Each of these have some, well, they have action for the general manager. Let's put it that way. The concern I have is that there were 2 problems, or at least one basic problem with the original M01. It had multiple steps in it, and it seemed to take an awful long time to get anything done. We went through 2 or 3 steps before it ever got to the attorney, and the attorney was understood to send out a letter to the violator to the effect that if you don't fix it now, we're going to take action. And this whole process would take an extended period of time. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that from the time the violation was documented and sent out to the violating property owner, and it got to, if it did not get resolved, it got to the attorney, and the attorney started doing the attorney's thing, it could be a good 90 days or more, perhaps. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. But that was a particular problem. Now, the M01, current M01 shortens that down, takes out the multiple steps and has it go to the ARC committee. And then from the ARC committee, it goes on to the general manager. But there's a significant emphasis that I believe was present in that the intent was not to slow down it getting to legal action, other than legal action being an attorney sending a letter out to the violator saying we're going to be taking further action if you don't correct this within a short period of time. There have been no CPI violations looked at by the board in the last 6 months or so. I think it goes back to November, I'm not sorry, September, before you can find anything in the minutes of the board meeting. And I also, I did this about 2 weeks ago, if you look on the Worcester County judicial status, that's not the right term for it, but you can call up the court history in Worcester County or any other county circuit court in Maryland and look for parties, and you won't find Ocean Pines as a party for the last year or more, other than in assessment rate related actions. So there's no, again, I'm 2 weeks ago. There's no apparent court action by Ocean Pines to enforce violations. And my concern is that that was one of the selling points of M01, although there is the authority for the general manager to not automatically forward to the attorney for court action. He can go to the board first. So there is some room in there for the general manager to take different action, if I can put it that way. But I think it's important that we clarify just how this resolution is intended to work. I don't much care how it reads. I care as a member of the association that we do keep the property of the owners in the condition that's expected, and I care that we have resolutions that are followed the way they should be. But at any rate, that's enough of me talking about this situation. It's due to go out for review. It's well overdue for review. I believe it's maybe as much as a couple of years overdue now. We put it off for well, maybe not. I'm looking at the notes now, or maybe not 2 years overdue. But we put off doing a lot of review because of the pandemic affecting court action situation. But anyway, that's enough of my comment. I'd like to turn it over to the group for your comments on where we need to go as far as requesting a review, and how we need to go as far as requesting a review of this resolution. And I'm going to step away for just a minute. There's something I need to check on. I'll be right back.
So the comments in here says that there was a court backlog.
Yeah,
So the review date was changed from July of 21 to March of 22 to allow for additional time for the court to clear the current backlog.
yes.
Do we know, does that happen?
I don't know. The problem that I see is
that's his
be
phone.
back. What's that? Somebody trying to join her?
No, that's his phone.
That's it.
Oh,
Jim.
his phone. Okay, we can't answer his phone. No, the problem was because of the bylaws changes, we kind of set this aside and we haven't followed up on it. You know, at the meetings, we've just taken very short view of it.
Right.
And as I said to Jim, it's now to the point everything is backed up. If you read the memo when they analyzed it,
Yeah.
and we need to start getting there. Now, my thought was that if they're board resolutions, we should look at them. And if we see the need for a change, recommend that to the board so they can make the change and get it through. If there's no change required, then we should recommend to the board, no changes are required, and just get their approval.
Mhm.
But we don't want to get to the point that if they don't get back, that we don't follow up, because
Right.
the board resolutions are much more serious
Right.
than the committee resolutions.
Right.
So,
Right.
so what was Jim saying? Was he saying that he's concerned because since there haven't been any violations brought to the board level, he's concerned they're getting backed up somewhere? Is that what he's concerned?
I think what he's concerned about is somehow it lost its visibility and it's not showing up at the board meetings. You know, it's hard to believe that the architect review committee hasn't seen any violations in a 6-month period.
Well, they started
And-
talking about, I know about trees and all that. I just saw that in the last week or two.
Yeah.
Final disposition of
What it-
final letter to the GM. So does that mean that potentially that the GM was able to address it and it was resolved? Is that what that means?
Where,
Here under says that CPI violations continue to be heard at the ARC level with disposition being final letter,
GM.
GM, yeah.
This currently allows. Yeah, so Jim, I think what we need to do is, Jim's back now, but we need to recommend to the general manager as to where we are in this process and why it's not being followed.
And couldn't the GM then, if
If-
they are resolving it at the GM and it's not going forward, at least have a statement saying we received
Right, a status.
X amount of
Right.
violations during this period of time, whatever, and they
Yeah.
were resolved and don't need to go any further.
Right.
So at least it just
Yeah.
clarifies that it's not sitting in limbo land somewhere.
Yeah,
Plus, it's good visibility for the general
Right,
public to
exactly.
see that,
That 20 things came in
right,
and all but 2 need to go into further litigation or whatever, process
Right.
or whatever.
because if they don't hear anything about it, then some people are gonna start to think that nothing is being done.
right.
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 And that's
It's
the
a
worst.
free reign at that point.
Right.
Yeah. Look, Jim,
Or-
Jim, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay,
I had one question about the government documents review at on MO01. I'm a little unclear as to the procedure. You have CPI violations are heard by ARC. And then the next step is it goes, if nothing gets taken care of, it says final letter, then GM. So ARC sends a letter, a last letter saying do this, or we're going to kick it up to the GM.
That's an uncertain thing to me too. I guess I didn't follow up on that at all. I don't have the unfortunately, I don't have the resolution in front of me. But I'm not sure in the steps whether it gives a final letter to the violator. Hang on, I should be able to call that up while we're.
is,
Well, here's why I meant, because I thought you also indicated that at some point the board attorney gets involved as well. I guess
Yeah.
it had to go to court or something. So
The original version of this version of M01, the update that occurred a couple of years or so ago, perhaps a little more than that, had a hearing by the ARC committee for the violator to come in and press the case that there is no violation, or I'm gonna correct the violation, but I need time to be able to do that.
Right.
Or the other possibilities would be an exemption or waiver, whatever the terms are in the ARC guidelines to effectively bypass the violation and say that the violation is acceptable.
okay,
But to have that hearing and not within, but after that hearing, if it had not been, violation had not been resolved one way or another at the meeting, or agreement had been made over a plan to resolve it, if none of that had occurred, it would go to the general manager. The general manager would forward it to the attorney for legal action. And again, my recollection is that it was not intended that the attorney send out a letter type of thing. We're going to send out. We're going to take you to court. Maybe procedure would call for that. I don't know. I admit I do not know that the attorney may, as a matter of practice, or may even be required to do that. I don't know that. But we did write in there a provision by which the general manager, before he sent it to the attorney for legal action, could consult with the board and decide what the board wanted to do, as opposed to this almost automatic from ARC to the attorney, with the general manager not being anything much more than a stopping off point to put it in different format and send it on to the attorney perhaps. What does this final letter mean? I don't honestly know. It's another I believe again, I don't know, is Josh, you on here?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if Josh is here, if we can put up the resolution.
Yes.
Okay, M01, it'd be paragraph 6, step 4, was where we're looking right now.
Okay, one second.
The final letter could mean everything's
I-
resolved, this is your final, all things cleared, or.
I want to
it
see
could
what it
mean
says,
this is
because
your
I
final
thought the
letter.
board
Have
yielded
not
to allow the
completed.
general manager directly
That's
to the attorney, but I'm not sure.
Oh,
And, you know, rather than have the board.
You get a chance? Guys, can I interrupt for a minute? I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to drop off the meeting. There's another situation at home that needs immediate attention. I can't stay any longer. I have to drop off the meeting. I'm sorry.
okay.
Okay,
Take care of yourself,
take care.
Well, it's not me. Okay,
take care of the family.
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you all still want to see that section or you want to reschedule
Yes.
the meeting?
No,
Okay.
we'll just continue with the meeting.
We would technically have quorum-ish.
Yeah, we got a quorum.
I heard MO1 6 and then where?
Let me just see. I didn't bring my reading glasses. Let's see.
Yeah, I just have the same.
Step 4, paragraph 7.
That's all of step 4. It's just 3 paragraphs.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah,
I wonder if it'd be, I wonder if he just meant to be.
So if you look there on B,
mhm,
ARC will notify the responsible party and the GM of its decision in writing. The notification to the GM shall include the addendum to this resolution. So potentially that is the final letter to GM disposition here.
mhm.
So I think, Lori, to your point, it could mean either,
Right.
that it's resolved or it's not resolved. But if it's not being brought up with the board like we're used to seeing,
Then the owners have no idea what's happening.
well, and the general public,
And the general public.
yeah,
Right.
Is
We
there,
need to know what's being resolved
Yeah.
and what's not,
yeah.
you know?
Josh, is it possible that we sort of, this got flipped, so it would be paragraph 6, step
Mhm.
7.
See.
Let me take a look. No,
Because what I don't see is any
Well,
any
let's
further action to be taken.
that's
at
just one
paragraph
paragraph.
7, step 4.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you might be right.
yeah, it just got flipped.
Yeah, to obtain court order.
Says the GM will notify the board via mail. Summary action.
Oh, and
It says resolved and those referred.
So
So this is-
should include both.
So this is to Jim's point, right? So Jim's point is that
Is it being done?
it's not, it doesn't appear to be being briefed.
Right.
And the committee's still seeing it, so it almost appears like this is not being complied with for some reason.
Yeah, and that was the intent, to allow the general
It
manager to
was.
get it through without waiting for the board.
Right,
In other words, apprise the board what he's doing, but go ahead and take the action.
right.
But there's no, okay, as I'm reading this right now.
Go ahead.
What I'm seeing is essentially the general manager has 2 steps.
Right.
One is to inform the board,
Right,
and the other, which is I think probably in the other paragraph, is to kick this over to the attorney, assuming that the ARC does not make, there's no resolution.
right.
So if necessary to go to court, and what the GM is doing in this paragraph is essentially saying, I'm telling the board, this is what the committee has done. And then at some point, depending on the case that he's talking about, if there's no resolution, I've kicked this over to the council.
Correct.
So he's got sort of two functions, one to
Right.
keep the board informed and one to send something to council if necessary.
Right.
And we've seen those,
In the past.
In the past, those statuses-
It's not,
yeah.
yeah.
It stopped for some reason.
It just says, if my memory serves me right, doesn't it just say
No
no?
CPI violations.
But
Right.
that doesn't give us that resolution part either. If, like you're saying, how it would be miraculous if there were no reports at all during that time frame in between meetings. I mean, maybe it could happen, but
Right.
is that really?
Seems unlikely.
Even if they should maybe word it as there were no violations received in that time period
Right.
versus nothing to report.
Yeah.
That
Right.
makes it sound like there's no report.
You get,
Well, yeah, in a community this size, it seems
Right.
unlikely that.
you get,
So what are we left with? Are we essentially saying here, I mean, there's no question, as I understand the discussion, there's no question that ARC is doing their job. In other words,
Right.
they either are informed of or determined on their own that there's a violation or proposed possible violation.
Right.
They bring the person in, they have a discussion, they can't resolve it. Okay, so you're at that point, if there's no resolution. The question then comes, what are we, what I'm trying to get at is, what is it that we expect of either the committee or the procedure? I mean, to me, the procedure is pretty clear.
So I think what Jim's point was, because we're not seeing the normal brief at the board that we're used to seeing, and because apparently the ARC committee is still doing work on these, and that the violations have a disposition of letter to the GM,
Right.
then either the GM is and or staff is interpreting this differently such that if there's no new violations, they're not going to provide a brief,
Right.
or there's some other change either in the understanding of the paragraph or in the execution of it. And that's what Jim's point is something changed? And if it has changed, does it mean we need to update the resolution?
Okay.
Or does it
Or
mean
just
that,
reinform
right,
the procedure
right,
to those team people.
But we actually have no way of determining that, because if we make the assumption that ARC is doing their job, the question then comes, is it that the GM and the board have an understanding that he's not going to, on a regular basis, report back to the board on this issue? It's his determination to kick it over to council or not, we'll leave it at that, or is it that for whatever reason, and I'm not assigning blame to the
No.
person assigning
No.
blame, but is the basic argument that it's just not getting done?
Right.
Now, maybe
So-
it's COVID related or whatever, but it's just not getting done.
well, I just noticed in the very first sentence, it says, we'll notify the board via email. It doesn't say we'll brief the board.
Well, that's true, yeah, he's giving them notice, that's all he's doing, right?
So he could be
Well, it's
informing
a
the
monthly
board
report, right.
and just not,
In a monthly report.
But we don't know that.
But then the board could be choosing just to interpret that everything's been resolved as well, there's nothing to put on their minutes, as an agenda item saying that there's anything to discuss versus saying GM said he received 10 violations and all 10 were resolved.
is it a
Yeah.
separate agenda item or is it just lumped into the GM's report?
it's
I
a separate
thought it was a
agenda item.
separate- it's
separate
like
agenda,
under
yeah.
like new business,
It lists-
like it's, how there's
And it
old business,
should
new
really
business.
So then that would
It
be-
has its own category right there.
So then that would be the question.
And you should have two categories, new
Right,
and unresolved.
right.
So I think all we could do, to your point, the only thing we could do is just a question via our liaison
Right.
to the board.
That's it.
Are we comfortable that this is being met because we're not seeing it at the board anymore? Or is it just maybe there's been a big turnover on the board, so maybe it's just an oversight
Right, and that's right.
in building the agenda for the meetings.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of two categories. Either it's not being followed as you described,
Mhm.
and we need to just understand that's it, or it's not working and the resolution
Right,
needs to be changed to comply with what they're doing.
right.
So I think there's an added step in there too, is just to verify, is ARC sending reports to the GM? like they're supposed to do, you know what I mean? Like, are they communicating on their end? If they are, then, you know,
Yeah.
where's the break in this?
Right. So really what it comes down to
We gotta
is,
start with ARC.
well, I was actually gonna suggest doing it the other way. What I was gonna suggest was our responsibility would be to have our liaison speak to the general manager, because that, based upon what Jim had said, we're operating, at least right now,
Right.
on the assumption that the committee is doing their work. So it would be up to the liaison to talk to the general manager to find out what's going on. Whether A, they're getting the reports and it's not appearing in the minutes or in the videotape, or they're not getting the reports, or the board has an understanding as to how it wants to proceed. And if the general manager says, well, I'm not getting anything from ARC, then we got to go back to ARC.
Before we do that, would it be better for our liaison, our board liaison, to contact the other board liaison
For
to
ARC.
ARC? You know, a fellow board person, because
Yeah.
now, if you listen, I watched the 3-minute special meeting they had this morning, because now there's a new liaison for ARC committee, which is because Rick Farr was that, but now he's the new secretary, because Josette resigned her officer position as secretary,
Right.
because she put in a candidacy
Oh,
Right,
application to run
Sure.
for election. So she's doing the right thing, you know.
Right, she's doing it right.
And Rick had been newly appointed as the ARC person, but now I believe, if I remember right, I think Josette is now. But that tells you right there, there's already been a turnover a couple of times now, even with our board liaisons to these committees. So maybe that could be part of
I
the
don't,
problem.
I don't think we need to get too detailed with it. I think we
Yeah.
just need to submit a question to our
So
liaison
she
Right.
can
for
figure
the
out
board that
who to ask.
we're wondering if, since we're not seeing the briefs at the board,
Right.
is the way that this is being complied with changed? Or is there,
Another explanation.
another explanation for it?
Right.
And
that's,
therefore, does the resolution have to be changed?
And Colette, she may come back to us and ask for more clarification, and then we can give it to her. And then she can decide who to go to and who she wants to talk to
It
about it.
very well could just be the semantics of
Yeah.
them not
right.
realizing that it would look better on the board agenda to say that, all violations were addressed
Yeah.
and resolved, versus saying, well, there's nothing to talk about because
Because
they were all
technically,
resolved.
the way that's worded,
It should work.
as long as he emails the board, notifies them,
Yeah.
it doesn't say it has to be briefed at the meeting.
Because that was one of the major changes made to expedite the process, allowing the general manager, if he thought it was appropriate, to contact the attorney and notify the board that he's done it.
Correct.
That gives the board the opportunity of saying, we disagree.
Instead of
or-
having to wait, yeah.
Right, because they're relying on the general manager, because it was getting layered to the point it took too long to bring things to a resolution.
Mhm.
My goodness.
So Jim, the conversation's being recorded, so Jim can pick it
Go
up
back and-
Yeah.
and then get information to the board liaison
Mhm.
to
Okay.
collect.
Yeah.
So that takes care of that one.
We did M01.
Okay, so M01 is done.
His next one, according to his email and priority, was M02.
Okay.
Well, for what it's worth, I mean, one of the bylaws provisions that we sent forward that made it out for the members to vote on did delete the listing of specific amenities and just said amenities.
Right.
You know,
But-
as it applied to board members getting,
Right.
free family membership.
Right, whatever.
So, we did not, we sort of moved away from specifying the amenities. That's of course the easier issue maybe than the one. above.
The resolution, though, I think, still needs to identify it, because the committee is responsible for the various amenities within that group. So-
Josh, can you bring up M02? I think what he's saying
Yes,
here
just a minute.
is that
Okay.
there's details listed in M02 that require periodic change.
Mhm.
And that we've talked about this in the past, that whenever you have stuff like that, it's never going to be up to date.
Right.
Right.
And so we've talked about trying to make
it
it generic or,
enough
Mhm.
so that if any of these changes, final
Okay, there we
changes
go.
have to go through referendum and all of that,
right.
we
Okay.
don't have
let's
to
see.
do that.
So what he said, for example, paragraph 10. Can you go down to paragraph 10, Josh?
I was gonna say, I don't know if I scoot it down.
No.
I don't
You're
think
not
that'll do it.
Oh, Josh.
Josh, you still there?
Can you-
Yeah, sorry.
Can you
No
go down
problem.
to paragraph 10?
As you're multitasking,
Always.
trying to do your own job plus.
Yes, sir. All right, we're looking at 10.
Have some-
Yeah, yeah.
I
Okay,
got 10.
let's just see what this says here. Turn this screen.
Oh, man.
So I see what he's talking about.
Yeah, that needs to be updated for
Yeah,
sure.
so basically what he's saying is there a better way to word that with generic information so that it doesn't have to be
Versus dates
updated all the
and-
time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, stupid question. What is the charter club?
Charter club. We're charter club
I
members.
don't know what that is. What it-
I mean,
what that is?
if I had to guess, I would guess it's a way to buy membership at some sort
Maybe
of
that's what they
rate to
call
all
one of
the
those
amenities,
packages.
but I'm just guessing. I have no
I
idea what it
don't
is.
know.
I'm wondering if you even need it.
None of us know what that means.
Hmm.
Chart. memberships. I'm thinking it's just those different memberships. They just called it charter. But I don't know. So yeah, are you making our list of questions?
Yeah, so because we're not going to solve it at this
Right.
meeting, right? At this meeting, we're just going to figure out what we're going to do at our next meeting,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
I think there's probably something legitimate here that
So
needs to be
we're gonna
looked
look
at.
Yeah.
So what is the
We're gonna
charter
look at
club?
Yeah, I-
for having
'cause I can't-
specific dates.
You know,
Yeah.
does
general
that date
dates.
back to
Let's
when they
ask
were
about
first
charter
offered and you
things.
bought the whole package?
Well,
and
it's-
became a charter and then you
Yeah.
continue?
There's more.
get
So
Every year you buy the whole.
access to all the amenities.
Right.
scroll down a little bit more there, Josh. Because you said under 11 beach parking, there's also more.
Okay.
Notwithstanding 11, no more than one will be issued to property address. I don't really see anything there under 11.
Number 11.
Property
Parking
owners,
for
resident
use at the
renters.
beach.
Oh, I don't think, I'm not sure, but I don't think resident renters can purchase a parking permit at the beach club anymore.
Oh, I think you're right.
I may be wrong about that, but I think that,
And then go down to 13, Josh. It's not obvious to me, but Jim probably knows that there's something in that that's not,
Yeah,
oh, it keeps going.
Just like the.
Oh, now see here, you have a list. You got percentages on there. So it seems to me this, the M02 is something that we're going to need to put on our list of things to
yeah, I mean, I would think if the GM sets out a policy, that would be the policy until the GM changes it.
Yeah.
I mean, part of that, I get what's there. I mean, it's, it's his responsibility. He can sit over to the, like aquatics or
right.
racket sports or whoever. I get that part, but it may be we don't have to go through the same level of detail.
Right.
Since
It was-
as a general rule that, we want the GM to make more of these decisions.
When I was,
Unless it has to be changed.
when I was involved with Pines Point Marina, which is independent of this homeowners association, and we scheduled our annual meetings through Ocean Pines. And that was one of the requirements that 60% of the membership be residents or own property in Ocean Pines. And that made sense.
Mhm.
We had like about 75%, so it was never a problem. But it was still the pecking order to pick the date you want and make sure it didn't conflict with people that had higher priority.
Right.
Right.
Right. But again, to
Yeah,
me.
so
I
I'm
would
not
think that's
sure-
something that either the GM or his designee.
Yeah.
Would just resolve.
And
Yeah, so one of the things that we talked about in this group before you came on was how there's some specificity in some of these resolutions that just make things harder. And we've tried in the past to look at ways of removing some of that
Mhm.
and making it more general
Mhm.
so that we're not constantly failing to comply with our own resolution because there's so much detail in
Right.
there.
And also to be able to make a change, having to go through the whole referendum
Yeah,
process of
right.
getting the members to all vote on a simple wording change like this. You don't want to have to do that all the time either,
Right.
as we're seeing.
Well, and to what degree are the bylaw changes going to impact these resolutions?
Right.
Because if you change something there, we need to make sure the resolution is consistent with the new bylaws if they're approved.
When will we know the results? of that?
That's scheduled for
Can't be that much long.
16th or something.
Can't
So it'll be
much longer.
before our next meeting.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, who knows? This may keep us in
Right.
work for another couple of years.
Yeah, it's through the May
My
19th, so we'll know on the
concern
20th.
All right, so we'll know. So I'm
That
just gonna,
could make a difference too. But the whole idea, I think, is, and what Jim was saying, to try to concentrate only on the M1 series, because those are all board resolutions. If there's no changes really required and we don't see the need, let's tell the board, don't change it, just approve it.
Right.
If there are
We have no
changes that we
recommendations.
recommend, we should tell them what we're recommending, because the board isn't going to take the time. They get enough things to be
Right,
busy
but
with.
that's right. But as to M02,
Mhm.
as he notes, many of the provisions require input from staff. So really, I don't know whether we could just have Colette do it or it has to go to the board to go to staff. I'm not quite sure what the procedure would be, but as just reading some of that, just now, I would think, staff could determine almost really what to do with most of this. Unless they come back and say, well, you have to decide how you want us to operate. To the extent it names the GM, he can designate, he can set up a procedure, he can keep it in the manual and go from there.
That's why,
Yeah.
We should, so,
Paragraphs,
so for us, for M02,
Mm.
we would just come out with a recommendation.
it should go out for review.
Yeah, that it should go out for review.
and
And
that one,
who reviews that? Do we review that? The board reviews that. In other words, we review that.
yeah,
So,
but Jim is saying,
yeah, if it's listed for the board, that
if
means we're
if
gonna
it's a
review it.
board resolution, we should recommend to
Yeah.
the board. If it's a committee, we can help the committee by stating the obvious. We don't want to do the committee's work. But
Right.
if we see something that's in conflict, tell them ahead of time that that's what we recommend. If we see no need for any changes, we should tell the committee chair, we don't see a need for the change unless you want to make a change.
Yeah, so
Let's just set a
think-
new review date.
so out of today's meeting, we would just simply say, initial review of M02 indicates that it probably needs to be reviewed.
Right.
And we will be providing some suggested language in the future.
Right.
On
And we'll-
our agenda.
Yeah,
as I said, while Jim
Right.
is missing the meeting, it's all recorded, so he'll be able to pick up on it.
okay, his next one was B03.
Right. 3 or 4?
He's got 4 on there too, but
Where did you see 3? I'm missing.
so M1,
Oh.
M2, B3,
Oh, B3.
Bravo.
B3. Okay.
bravo.
That's where you got my
Beer-
attention.
Beer 3.
My hearing is slowly going downhill.
I've got my little hearing thingy.
B3. Okay, resolution holding to the.
Oh, look, Josh has already got it up. He's on it.
Boy, he's quick.
Incorporate the.
Hey, Josh, come on down. You can have a donut and some coffee.
You're missing out.
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna reload.
Save me a Boston cream.
You might be in luck.
Well,
I don't
think
even
we
know
have.
it's there, but you might be in luck.
I don't know, Bob's put all his papers on top of the.
It's become my file cabinet. But yeah,
Definitely should have brought my glasses.
the big problem is we've ignored these so long because we were busy on other work. And now everything is backed up and we can't get them all fixed at once.
Yes,
Getting-
yes.
Yeah.
Is that full test?
Yes.
Yeah.
High test and
High
low
test,
test.
yeah.
And I need all the high tests I can get.
Yeah, you went overboard with this. Good for you.
My pleasure. He's waiting a lot.
Yeah, he's welcome to come in.
Josh, did you admit Stuart?
I'll go out.
I can do it.
I just did.
Okay.
He's in the lobby, so we'll tell him to come in.
Is he in our lobby or? that
No, no, no,
lobby?
no. No, in the
This
virtual,
lobby.
the
Oh,
virtual,
lobby.
the virtual lobby. He probably logged out and then when he logged back in,
Okay.
he had to let the administrator know.
Okay.
Okay. So
Yep,
what is-
exactly.
Yeah.
Should
Sorry,
be
if you're there, our
revised
apologies for not letting you in earlier.
to incorporate the
He's been
format.
in,
Oh, he has been in all along. Okay.
yeah, he's been
Recent.
in for a while, because his little.
Oh, I see what you got. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I see what he's saying here. It's another language issue.
Which one are you looking at now? B3?
Three, yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna play bingo. That's what it is, it's
Bingo.
bingo.
That's great.
Deleted in business and replaced. Deleted.
Josh, is there more to scroll down on B3?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're looking to get to
B3.
some of the discussion about
Scroll
pending
down.
business and
Scroll down a little bit further, please. Procedure, a little bit further.
We're looking for the agenda part. though, right?
Motions, a little bit further.
order of business.
Here you go. This is what he's talking about here.
To approval of agenda,
Appointments.
so it's gotta go down a little bit more. 'Cause- Yeah, there. So
There you go.
see, that's the pending business that that's mentioned.
So basically, the wording that's in here about the agenda doesn't match what they have been doing in the
Right.
actual annual
Calling it
meeting.
unfinished.
So, the question is, was that just arbitrary? Was it just unintentionally arbitrary?
Or does that need to be updated to include this, or?
Yeah, is there a specific reason that that's like that? So they should literally be following that or?
While you hate and or, it should list this or this.
Yeah,
Pending business,
well, part of-
I thought, I like the unfinished versus and the new business because that really just puts a distinction between the two of
Mhm.
things that are still ongoing or things that are just now being brought up.
Right,
You know
new
what I
and
mean? Yeah.
unfinished
Versus
is,
pending, if you lump them all together, it's hard to track, I think, things.
Well, we require Robert's Rules of Order, right?
Yeah.
So number one,
Yeah.
why do we have this listed out here so specifically? Because we already require Robert's Rules of
Right.
Orders. Number two, should it say something more generic, like at a minimum, the meeting should address,
Give a little
to
bit of leeway.
include, but, what is the wording? To include but not limited to,
Yeah.
right.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right?
Should at least have these, like you said, limited or minimum required categories,
Yeah.
but not limited to, and then list them out so that you're at least hitting all those major areas.
Instead of being specifically,
To be honest with you, part of the question I have just reading from Jim's memo is, he points out the changes that he lists here were in the 2021 meeting. Doesn't say it happened before then, and we haven't gotten to the 2022 meeting, so it might have just been a blip on the radar screen
Right.
for all I know.
So maybe this is just a question from us,
back to the
to-
board.
right, to our board liaison. Is this something that you want to change? Maybe that was just inadvertently arbitrary.
It may have just been an either, change the terminology. It might have just been an error because
You-
we
you
didn't follow
figure
what
you
was there.
Keep
I don't-
changing secretaries.
Right.
Secretary puts the agenda together.
The only thought I have as far as maybe why they have it spelled out here is how many people really know about what Robert's Rules of Order is.
Yeah.
And it to the
Yeah.
distinction of saying, we need to know if we have quorum to conduct business. We need to approve the agenda and those kind of things. So maybe that's why they listed it all out in this one versus just saying we're following Robert's Rules of Order. Maybe there's at some place there that should be designated because unless you're fond of these kind of meetings,
Yeah.
a lot of
Except
people
for-
don't really know exactly what that means, other than they hear us all going, make a motion, second, I,
Right.
Right.
that stuff.
But, I mean, even the ascertainment of quorum, as I'm reading this right now, it seems to me that's just an item that would be listed on the agenda. In other words, call to order, approval of last year's minutes, whatever, and is there a quorum present? Yes, quorum is present. Okay, and then we drop down.
The sequence of order has to be the quorum. 'Cause
That's
if you
come
don't
first,
have-
yes.
if you don't have a quorum, you can't
Yeah,
approve
can't
anything.
transact
Move
business.
Yeah.
Can't transact business, you're right.
So since, I guess, so as I think about this more, so this is the annual meeting that we're talking about, right?
The big one.
So the members of the meeting, of this meeting are like us,
Yeah.
where we approve this agenda.
Right.
Jim writes it up and then we, the members, approve it, right?
Right.
So is this in here like this, do you think, so that the members can approve it?
Again, I'm just
And
guessing.
if they don't approve it, I mean, how would you know that, number one? But let's say that they didn't approve that. I mean, I don't think there's any machinery in here by which to change the agenda.
Right, to me, this is simply the outline of what the agenda has to have in it for the annual meeting.
At a minimum.
Yeah, because also remember that one of the things they have to do is ratify the report of the election committee on the election. And Bob's right, before you do anything, you establish that a quorum is present, then you approve the minutes and primary, and and this is just the tick list you're gonna go down.
Yeah.
That's an owners meeting, which is different than our meeting, because the owners are the ones that attended the last meeting.
Mhm.
So if there's not a quorum at that meeting, they can't approve anything.
right.
If they're there and they object to something, they have the right to say those minutes aren't correct because it didn't include X.
Right.
So it just made me think of something, right? So we're more than likely going to have some sort of virtual presence in all meetings going forward, right?
Probably.
And I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the last meeting, we didn't have a quorum.
Correct.
Correct.
So the meeting
That-
was
that's
ended.
part of the
So
problem.
the meeting, yeah, so that meeting, the minutes from the prior meeting have to be carried over to next year.
So
to
do you
2022.
remember in that meeting, did they also count the people online?
Well, that one I don't think was hybrid at all.
I don't think
one
that was
fully in
online.
person. If I recall.
Right.
Well, they record,
The last.
They
annual-
may have recorded it, but.
they
I
may
don't
have
think it-
recorded it, but they
Yeah,
weren't
like a
hybrid.
regular video.
That's correct. There were no virtual participants
Yeah,
ever in
that-
an annual
that
meeting,
can
to my
be.
knowledge.
But
Yeah.
Josh, do you think that in the future, that might be the case?
It would depend on our bylaws if we can do.
Right, and well, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, I don't know that we can do it. We'd have to figure it out.
Our bylaws would have to say.
I
if
don't
we
think the
can
bylaws include that
accept Any
option.
kind of
I don't
voting
think the
other than.
bylaws ever contemplated.
Well, right, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's where I'm going with this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
if this particular resolution is gonna be considered for some sort of review, then part of that, not just, fixing this language to
Right.
something that's easier to manage, but also the consideration of if it's gonna be a hybrid meeting,
Mhm.
then
Who is.
the
eligible to
count of
vote
the
then,
people
right,
online
to be
should be
counted.
included in the count and the people in the room.
Which raises another question. Josh, quick question. If you had a hybrid meeting, would someone, for instance, sitting in your chair who's running this stuff, would you be able to have a count of everyone who's online, either watching or participating in the meeting?
And make sure they're not duplicates and that they are
Yeah.
property owners.
Right.
We would,
Yeah, well, someone could sign in as a guest with any name they choose, so there's
Yeah.
really no way that I know of to verify property owner's
And you probably
status
can't
virtually.
verify it.
Well,
but he could
what,
also assign somebody to help monitor all of the check-ins. And if we have a roster somewhere, this is what we do for PTA is, because, you know, COVID messed us all up too. And
Mhm.
our bylaws originally said only in-person meetings or voting allowed, but then we've now expanded. And so as long as we can find a way to verify that they're a member, and two, make sure that everybody supposedly can see and hear everything, all the discussion clearly, then you can count the virtual votes and do a voting virtually.
and
But
one of the things you could do is when they sign in, like Josh said, you could sign in, you could change the name.
Yeah.
Set to Mickey Mouse.
Sign in as key.
You could sign in as your street address,
right,
Yeah.
right? So on Josh's roster, as he looks at it, all he would see is street addresses.
well, but I would change. I would like. I don't know how Teams works. I'm more of a Zoom person because I'm do all my meetings that way. We do it in our chat because the chat can actually be saved. I can't save, at least in Zoom, I can't save the participant list to be able to go back and double check and verify that all
I
those
think you
are
can
actual.
on Teams.
In Teams, you're
Yeah,
right.
I
So
think
maybe
you
if
can.
Josh can figure out, you know, if he does Teams can do that, that's fine. Otherwise, I would do it on whatever portion of it that can be
So-
saved to your computer so that somebody has a paper trail to go back.
So
and
what
look
we're
at it.
suggesting then would be that this should be referred to the board for resolution, and it should include
How we
the
vote.
consideration
Consideration.
of a hybrid meeting that is permissible under the bylaws, which may require the board to take additional action, and that membership can be verified as to what you want to say, legitimacy,
Right.
whatever term you want to.
Validity.
It should at least be looked at.
Yeah.
It should at least be looked at because I think it's the reality of the future.
Yeah.
So
And if we
as
want
long
to
as the
include,
bylaws thing is, it's up for review because I haven't looked at mine yet.
No, there's nothing
Um,
about.
Is there anything about the electronic voting in that? I thought it's been discussed, but I thought that was one of,
I don't remember.
I have to go back and look, but.
well, but electronic
Bylaw
voting
changes?
for elections and referendums is different than if you're sitting in a room and
Right.
you're voting. Do they vote on things at the annual
Well,
meeting?
you're, and this is a unique thing.
No,
'cause
it's
you're
nothing
trying
else. You
come-
still have to
encompass-
establish the quorum if you're doing a hybrid meeting.
Right.
Still got to
Yeah.
find a way to count them.
So, I mean, for today's purposes, for what we're doing today, and the bottom line is I think we all agree that B03 needs to be looked at.
Right.
We can refer this back to the board as we've looked at this. We think that there is reason for this to be reviewed for possible language modification and consideration of inclusion of hybrid meetings in the future for the annual meeting.
And the appropriate procedures that would follow.
And so then this, Colette would take this back to the board. If they agree, they're just going to come back to us and go, okay, what do you think? And then we'll work on it.
What do you
Yeah,
want
they're
us
gonna-
to do?
Then we're going to tell Josh, ask Josh how to do it. We don't know.
We will seek appropriate technological counsel.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Jim's next one was B04.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so he's saying the agenda has been expanded, doesn't necessarily match what's written here in the resolution
So
though.
this must be
So this
something
is an
really
update.
specific.
Mhm.
So it sounds like it's listed out like this one was, you
Yeah.
know, with the agenda items. This sounds like it must be,
So submission of proposed agenda items. Can you scroll down a little bit, Josh, please? Discussion topics, workshop or regular meeting topics shall include.
Because his comment here, a motion form is now in use and whether it should be in the resolution could be an item for consideration.
So submit the following to the secretary. That's what he's talking about, this format.
Yeah,
That must be the form he's referring to.
yes.
Or is it actually converted to a form later in the, is there a
It
form?
sounds like one of the secretaries made a form to use. That's the way I'm reading it.
Scroll down a little bit, Josh. Is there actually a form attached to this paragraph?
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, right there.
Go back
Yes.
up, back
Scroll
up.
back up a little bit, please.
To the-
Right, a little bit more. Stop.
There you go. Same thing, you got it. That's
Okay.
basically it.
That's the same tick list again. Well, not the same, but
Similar,
Agenda
very
includes
similar.
them more extensive.
So I guess our question is really the same for that one.
Yeah, does it
I mean,
need to be this specific,
Mhm.
or should it say something a little
Well,
bit more
this-
generic?
Limit-
Yeah, but keep in mind,
recommended,
this
but
is-
not limited to the following.
Well, yeah, but keep in mind, this is board meetings, not the
Right.
member meeting, not the annual meeting. So I would think the board has a little bit more leeway. I mean, to the extent that indicates what's required of motions, the fact that some secretary, whoever it was, I don't even know how long it's been in effect,
Well,
developed a form. I mean, that's all this says.
Mhm.
There's the director has to provide, this, I want this to be considered. So in the form of a motion, this is what I'm making. He's got to file it with the secretary. The secretary has a form, says, here, fill this out. And that's what he does. And then
mhm.
gets on the agenda that way. Whether or not there has to be a form in the resolution, I don't see why that to be necessary, but
Oh, I agree. I agree with
Yeah,
that.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think there needs to be a form in here.
No,
I'm just,
that's close enough to a form.
I think what he's saying here is that the way this is written, this appears to indicate a very specific agenda flow.
right.
So is that meant to be literal or just guidance?
Well, and hasn't it been brought up recently where public comments wasn't in that list in the order of the agenda? I know I've heard the rumblings about where public comments were too early in the meeting, so they didn't know what the board was gonna say, and then they might have changed their public comment later, so it had been kind of adjusted and moved around. The board has moved it. So does that mean then,
That's actually a good point, because if you look on there, public comments is before unfinished
Right.
business.
and
So,
then it has been changed more recently to accommodate the ones who were saying that it wasn't the right place to do it, later in the meeting.
so that's a double-edged sword, right?
Mhm.
Because the public could comment on something that could potentially influence a board member, so that
But they already
during,
voted.
so that during unfinished or new business, they take that into consideration, right? If the public doesn't comment until afterwards,
They've already voted and
dies
now
fast.
said
Yeah.
they don't agree with it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
so.
And
so
by the way, the other point, the agenda comes out before the meeting anyway.
Right.
So if you're going to incline to make a public comment, you would be
You already know
going in
what-
knowing what the agenda is.
Yeah.
Now, in fairness to the public comment section, if you just list new business and you don't say what's coming in under new
That
business.
you don't know what to comment about.
Right, so, it needs to be a little bit more specific, but,
Right.
you know.
And I think for the most part, that has been.
That's
they've
my sense, yeah.
Included some information. I believe it's in the correct order now. I think it's more beneficial to do public comments prior to the information.
Mhm.
That's how we do ours, for our Board of Ed back in another county and,
Because you want to influence the board's decisions.
now,
Yeah.
one of the things that's different there is our Board of Ed is not interactive. So you just say your public comment and that's it. You don't get responses back during the
You
meeting.
don't normally.
You know,
from the
right.
board, do you?
Yeah, which
So
I
this,
never.
this
understood.
board,
No.
this association is very different in that manner, in that they will communicate and, answer questions right then. But,
Sure.
I think it would be better to be in this thing. So in this order. So does that mean what
Well,
flexibility does the current board have in how they want to move these items around?
Well,
You know what I
And
mean?
again, that basically is a board decision.
Right.
Yeah, and
I
by
mean,
the way, it does say draft. I'm assuming that means this is our draft recommendation of what should, minimal,
Of what
should be
you want.
included in a board agenda.
Right.
So
So then that gives.
unless
them
there's
that
something else
flexibility.
that we're missing, which is always possible,
Could you scroll back up a little bit, Josh?
this is, yeah, this is a board
The
decision,
sequence of agenda items shall normally be as outlined below.
right?
Maybe
May be
modified.
modified by majority.
Majority of the-
Which I think they've done in the
Doesn't
past.
have to
They've
They've
amended the
moved it
agenda.
around at the meetings.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm seeing the problem here.
well, the only
I'm not either.
other issue that's here is, what Jim says about, was it the second red line down, particular reports of specified business topics such as purchase requests and CPI violations are included outside of new business. So I guess he's asking, should it be new business? Or should it just be included in the report section? Or, but again, to me, that's a board decision, how they want to arrange that.
How they want to label new business.
Right.
And underneath it include CPI violations or whatever.
Or they can do it under specific reports. I mean, because there was another section in there, as I recall.
Where
about
committee reports.
Committee reports and whatnot. Yeah, so, I mean, they lay out, sort of, this is a model list, but the board is free to change it as it sees fit.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm seeing anything.
I think what Jim is doing is citing his concerns,
Yeah,
and they're fairly well here. Now, does the board agree with them or not?
Mhm.
I don't think it needs to be that specific.
yeah,
Because
I mean, to me, my,
The owners elect the board decides how to run the
Yeah,
organization. If
we
you don't
agree
like
with
the
that.
board, vote them out next time. But the board, if the board doesn't have flexibility of setting their own agenda, I mean,
Right.
that's, now you're micromanaging the board.
Right.
That's not right.
as long as the agenda goes out and the membership is adequately informed, I mean, that's the basis of, can't remember, the HOA law. I mean, it's really boiled down to its simplest form is
Yeah.
you provide notice and you give everybody an opportunity for comment.
Right.
And that's what it's all about. And you're right, it gives the board some flexibility.
Right.
If they put the agenda out 2 weeks ahead of time and find out, a few days later, well, we got this emergency coming up, we can get it on the agenda, they should be able to change the agenda if they have to.
Sure.
To me, that's what I would say.
Or they can even change the agenda right at the meeting.
Yeah. they can do that.
So
You
new
have to
item
approve
came in.
it.
Right.
You have to approve the
Right.
agenda at the
Right.
meeting, so
Right.
at that point, if it needs to be changed,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
changing it then anyway.
They've done that. Very-
Yes,
And Jim's, his final sentence here is about the form. He says there's a form that's in use and whether it should be, I'm adding the word specifically, in the resolution could be an item for consideration. And I'm not sure. I think it needs to
I don't-
specifically.
Well,
To me, that's adding detail to the resolution and not
well,
removing.
and doesn't give the flexibility of whoever designs that, as long as everybody knows what a motion slip looks like and gives the appropriate information on there, what the motion is, who's signed by, recorded by, whatever.
Yeah.
We shouldn't dictate what it looks like,
Yeah.
because then wouldn't we have to go back through this whole approval like we did with the application for candidate stuff to update stuff like that? Or can you just say,
well, no, but.
a motion slip must be submitted on record to the secretary or whatever?
Yeah, I mean,
You know what I
as I recall what this said about it basically said, as I read what Jim is saying here, is that there is a motion form, whereas the motion, B04 basically says, the secretary shall and lay out, yeah, there it is. Directors initiating shall submit the following to the secretary. The form that he's saying is simply, there's a form in place now to meet B1.
Right.
If they want to change the form, let them change the form. I mean,
Right.
I don't think it needs to be
So I don't,
specifically.
right, I
No,
don't, I don't think it needs to be
Okay.
added, like proof that there's a form.
so
So-
we don't have, to us, there's really nothing to do with B.
We don't see a need to do anything with B04 right now.
Right.
All right. Next one, M06. Ooh, might not be able to do anything with this one.
Might need some coffee for this
Might have to wait on this one.
Which one's that?
one.
Elections and referendums.
Uh-huh.
Elections wants to amend 5A of the basic text. Be the second Friday of June. Seems like have we talked about this? Considered as revising a duplicate ballot procedure. Scan is being used.
Do you want me to step out? Because I am a candidate for the board.
Well, this is about the deadline. Additional candidate deadline for submissions.
There you are.
Yes, sir. Good.
And
They need a lawyer.
seems like we talked about that. But the other one he talked about in here is revising the duplicate ballot procedure. Duplicate ballot procedures. He have him 6 up here. Okay.
Is that under there, Josh? Can you scoot it down? Do we have, is there something about duplicates on there? Or duplicate ballots, maybe?
Instructions on how to obtain a duplicate ballot.
It says, it talks about how to obtain a duplicate ballot. But wasn't a concern.
Except for those marked as duplicate. Here we go. Receipt of ballots. There you go. This is the 8. Or signed for by at the administrative. Now that's interesting. So you should be able to come here to this office and pick up a new package. The return envelope shall be marked to indicate that it's a duplicate. A record of the duplicate voting, whether mail or picture, shall be maintained by the committee for 1 year. And what did he say?
I think they set that out.
Apparently a lot number scan is being used. The reason I say that's interesting to read that is because some people are complaining that they didn't get their,
Right, there's a lot.
Yeah.
online I've
they didn't
seen
get their
saying,
ballot, right?
yeah,
And
Are
and-
they,
what I'm reading is that they're notifying the committee and the committee is mailing them a new one,
right,
but they're concerned that they didn't get the first one mailed, so they might not get the second one
so
mailed.
those people might not be full timers who have a mailbox here that could come in and pick it up. So they would, maybe committee has to mail it, of them a second package, but then they might not be able to mail it back and get it back here by the deadline.
Hmm.
You know, like if, you know, because in my situation, I'll probably need to go update my own address
Mhm.
because my packet's probably sitting in Hartford County.
Yeah,
And I probably should just go over here and, you know, say, I need a new packet,
So they
and
would-
update my address in here to make this mailbox my full-time mail
Right.
for OP stuff.
so they would issue you a new packet, but they would mark it as a duplicate
Right.
Right.
so that when it
So that
shows,
when I turn it in, they realize that.
they'll check to
that-
make sure
they'll
it has.
Sure, they didn't get
If
two
both
from
come
me.
in, they
Right.
void them both.
Right,
The one thing you gotta remember is, this was explained to me some time ago, is Ocean Pines does a mailing. They drop it off at the post office right here.
mhm,
It goes up to Baltimore
Yeah.
for sorting, and then it comes
Then it
back
has to-
down again.
Right.
So it's
They don't have a sorting machine here.
Right, the opportunity for it to get lost, misplaced, end up on the floor is higher.
or
Let's be
takes
honest.
the scenic route to get
Yeah,
posted.
yeah.
The
Mhm.
Postal Service eliminated Easton. It used to go to Easton and back,
Oh, really?
and they eliminated, they closed that facility.
Okay,
So now it goes to Baltimore.
Yeah, where
So
the, where
then
the
the
volume is
question-
much higher.
Right.
so the
Yeah.
question is, I wonder if
And-
a lot of the ones not getting their packets, are they out of staters, like long distance, not people with a mailbox here, or is it also including our own local residents who should be getting it?
Yeah, I don't-
Well, and
Yeah.
me specifically, I'm just curious if they're being told.
Right,
You have a choice. You can either come into the administrative office, maybe that means you drive down here,
right,
who knows?
right,
And you can pick up one directly and sign for it,
I
or
don't-
we can try to mail you another one.
I don't think,
right,
yeah, I don't know.
Because I didn't know that.
No,
yeah.
that one I didn't know.
Think I've seen where it was advertised you could go to the office and ask for it versus emailing the committee directly. Like, would I have to, you could ask now,
Apparently a
would I
lot
have to
number.
email the committee first before I can go ask the ladies up front to reissue?
Well, first of all, if you didn't get one, how do you know what the procedure is to get one?
Right.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I read that.
That's true, that's a good point.
I mean,
yeah.
if you didn't get it, how do you know what you're
If the
supposed to do?
procedures for requesting it are in the ballot
Yeah.
that you didn't get,
And you didn't get it, how do you do it?
right?
Where is that information then posted?
Yeah.
And how does it get out to the
And-
members that way?
Yeah, there should be just a general posting
wonder if
online that
there's-
says if you did not receive your ballot, you can go up to the
On
admin.
the
They
website,
include
it should be on the front
Josh.
page of the website
Right.
while the
Josh
election
may
is
have
going
it on
on.
the website too,
Well, that, and I was gonna say, when's that quarterly,
but a lot of
big
people don't
newsletter
look at the
that
website.
gets that? Couldn't we
I
include
mean,
in
the same
the
people that
section in there
complain
that
don't
says,
look at the website,
for
they don't look at
any
anything, they
questions
just
about-
complain.
It should just
Yeah.
be standard
yeah,
and
that's
any
just always
announcement.
in here, contact,
Yeah.
admin or whatever,
So what do you think Jim meant about
Which one now?
we're still on.
when he said, a topic which has not been considered is revising the duplicate ballot procedure, period. Apparently a lot number scan is being used. A lot number scan.
That's the unique envelope that they send out with it, or the code that
got a
they send with
It's
it.
got the lot number code on it.
It either is a lot number code or it's a code assigned to your lot number.
Okay.
So they,
Does that that?
Is he saying-
Or stays the same all the time then?
Yeah, it's different than your address. It's not the same as your street
Yeah,
address.
your-
It's a,
the lot number is different than the
Gotcha.
street
Okay,
address.
so each
Right.
election or whatever that
Yeah.
requires
And-
that voting, it might be different.
And they can take the lot number or they
And
can
but
convert
match
the
it
lot
to-
number to a different number, but it's still the same control.
so
Because
is he
each lot-
saying that if that's what's being used, that should be incorporated into this? Is that what he means, you think?
I'm not sure on that.
If we're gonna
one.
use lot number as your identity, should that,
Well, my guess, again, I'm just guessing at this, is, I don't know the last time this was revised, but it's distinctly possible if this has been in place for a while, before the election committee with assistance from staff and whatnot, have gone to machine reading of ballots.
right,
So they probably were doing hand counting at some
Right.
point.
yeah.
They were.
And so now with the lot number, which I remember correctly on the envelope, something like a barcode,
Yeah.
and it's on the envelope.
Yes,
So,
that's right.
I don't know that you need, well, I don't know, but I'm just guessing that there has to be something that says, I thought there's someplace in here, that the counting of ballots is done by a machine. Unless the machine doesn't work or something, then they go to a hand count.
Correct.
That's my recollection.
Right. Yeah, and what they do is the envelopes are either scanned first before they're open to
Right.
verify they're valid.
Right,
And then once they're open, there's no identity
Right.
tied to them.
right.
But it's that unique code that they're using to keep track of. They send out 8,200, whatever the
Right.
number is, and that they
And
get.
that's also how they track the duplicates.
Right.
Right.
They
So-
know to discount one of the two barcodes if they both came in.
If they both come in, I think they throw the ballot out because it's not right.
Yeah,
You know, how do you know which
wouldn't know
ballot would
which
be
is
good?
which.
Right?
You're right.
That's true.
Yeah, I think a duplicate gets thrown out,
Or at
If
least
you-
set aside,
set aside.
probably set aside. Anyway. I
because,
think it says that someplace in the resolution.
Unless you're
That's
saying, unless you
duplicate.
get one ballot, even though it's labeled duplicate, but you don't have a second one. Then you know that one that
It's
you
right, it's
received
marked
is
as
the
a
ballot.
duplicate,
Take
so,
it.
and it's set aside.
And then to make sure there wasn't another one already
from
from
that same lot
The
number.
original,
I mean,
right.
Right.
that's good. I mean, that's just a logical way of
Right,
tracking it.
right.
So for our purposes today, it sounds like we all agree that this probably should be reviewed.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, just to make sure it's up to date, I think. that's-
And it really, and that one is more, and I think we changed that M6. Hold on. Yeah, we're basically saying, even though that's a board responsibility, Jim is saying the chair of the committee, which has now changed, should look at that.
Okay. All right, next one is Bravo 01. Legal review. Interesting. Can you, Josh, can you bring up B01? What does this say?
Yeah.
Let me know when you're ready to scroll down.
Yeah,
You scroll down a little bit, Josh.
good. Okay.
Introducing, approving, and repealing. Okay. Can you scroll down a little bit more so we can read paragraph 3? I think this is where Jim's going.
Yeah, I think so.
This is the first readings of the second reading.
Mhm.
This is the section with the first and second readings that we've had a few glitches in the recent past
Yeah.
year.
Yeah,
Where we
but-
submitted one, it was read at a meeting, skipped a meeting, and then realized it didn't get the second one like it should have. And so they came back to it, which then delays even more the timeline of knowing if it's approved or not.
Right.
Can you scroll down a little bit more, Josh? So what Jim is saying here, and I'm not seeing it in here,
4D.
4D. Applicability.
Mhm.
That's not 4D. Adoption of resolution action is not, because 4 goes down further. There we are.
Here we go.
Legal review.
That's it.
Not required before adoption.
shall establish. Making review responsibility to be the Bylaws Committee.
So number C is.
I think what he's saying is, nowhere in here does it really talk about the review of the resolution in general?
By the committee.
What normally,
Right,
In other words, after the first reading, I'm guessing that what this is saying is that after the first reading, the resolution should be referred to the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee for review.
right,
right,
And then the committee would make a recommendation of some type
right,
back to the board prior to the second reading.
right.
Now, I think I'm right. I don't think the second reading has to be on the successive meeting of the board. There can be a gap,
Right,
Right.
but there has to be a first reading and a second reading at some point.
and I think what he's saying here is that the way this is worded, we're tasked with making a recommendation whether or not it needs to go to council, but we're not tasked with reviewing it in the first place.
Right.
Right, and I think, and I think it's sort of.
Why are we getting tasked after the board has read it first time?
No.
Shouldn't we,
No, it has to be before the board.
Let me-
for the
Right.
first
let me just go back a little bit in history.
Yeah.
Because the committee took the position several years ago that the resolutions were the responsibility of the committee. So if a committee wanted to change something,
okay.
submit it to the board. If the board agrees with it, they'll have a first reading. They will then send it back to our committee
Then
to look
we
at it, to
at
make sure it
make
doesn't
matches
conflict with any
everything.
bylaws or
Right.
anything
That
else.
makes more sense, yeah.
And then after that, we're in a position to say, we really think a lawyer should look at it. Or no, we don't see a problem, but it affects this, this, and this. So look
our
at that.
recommendation
And then
comes in
it goes back to that committee as well, and they can make their changes. Then it goes back to the board.
Before the second
Right.
reading.
So that
where then
piece-
we vote on it.
Is not in here.
That piece is not in there.
Yeah.
Right,
And now Jim is now saying, and I agree with him, is especially in resolutions that go to the board,
Mhm.
this committee should take the leadership to look at the resolution and say, we don't see any need for change, or we suggest you look at this, this, and this.
it affects these other areas.
Right.
Then
Yeah.
they
And
look
then-
at it.
And then send it to the board so they can look at it, because the board does not have time to get into the detail. That's why they got the
Yeah.
committees.
Right.
Now, Jim also mentioned, and we have a procedure that defines that, but that procedure is in ours and not
Right.
part of their other resolutions,
That's right.
is for us to take the responsibility for other committees too, to look at it and just make sure there's nothing that should be changed, because a committee may not see something that we
Or
could see.
A
So we
committee-
should look at it and send it to them saying, we don't see the need for a change, or
Right,
you should look at this, this, and this.
right.
Right, yeah.
Or the committee might not see what we're seeing,
Right.
the whole package as this, the wording doesn't match.
Right. But-
You know,
My concern is, and I'm now leaving I'm term limited, but
I think
Over-
we should make an exception.
over a period of time, what happened is we involved in expanding this form to the point that we had much better control. Now with COVID and with the bylaws, we left it slip. It's now to the point that we can't catch up on all of it. The resolutions are important, but let's take them in piecemeal.
Right,
And what Jim and I agreed with
right.
is let's do the ones that are board responsibility. They're the most important.
Here-
I did see, just so you know, that there was an extension on one of the communications people to go beyond their term. So anyone who's coming
I,
up.
I would give another year, but beyond that.
Everything's waivable, Bob.
I'm 84 going on 85.
Our consult, though, can we, you know? Unofficial
Make it
consult.
ex officio.
Jim is the one with the real history and he's leaving, and Jim and I are.
Here's the, but I see sort of him making 2 points.
Go
One
ahead.
is the one you just described, Bob. The other one is the current resolution, paragraph 4D, merits some discussion to avoid delay or miscommunication regarding legal review. As I'm reading this, and I seem to recall there was a discussion at one of our earlier meetings about whether or not we could seek review by council before we make a recommendation to the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
I'm a little fuzzy on that.
No, you're right.
It was,
You're
you're
right.
right, you're right.
And I'm reading this as saying,
And that doesn't say that.
that it's not required before adoption by the board of directors. The bylaws and resolutions, advisory committees may recommend the advice of council be obtained prior to board action. I'm not quite sure I know what Jim is saying, but it would seem to me that if all resolutions are gonna come back to the bylaws committee prior to final action by the board. The bylaws committee should have the ability to request advice from council.
Right.
And I'm reading that last sentence is saying that, but I'm not, I may be missing it, but that's what.
No, I think you're probably right about
Right.
that. And what we talked, so that did come up before. You're right. We
Yeah,
talked about
It
this.
did.
And the sticky point is, that means money. Right? The advice of council
How
costs
often
money,
do we-
right?
Should any,
So should we as a committee be able to start spending the association's money by tasking the lawyer, with our questions without going through the board?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't have the answer for that one. I mean, there's a couple of ways you
But
could
the
skin the
issue
cat.
also
One would be
too-
for the association to hire an in-house counsel. That's one part. The other thing would be to set a pot of money aside from out of the legal budget that would
That's
allow,
what we're
until
thinking
you
of.
exceed that amount, the bylaws committee could continue to consult with council. Council at some point would have to inform the board and the committee, you've reached your cap. I mean, that's the other way
Yeah.
to do
the
it.
other,
But that's not in it.
the third
That's the
option
budget, yeah.
is that the board liaison is authorized by the board to allow the committee to go. That's the other option.
That
That
would-
it's a board member spending board money,
Right.
because right now, I
That's a
think
good
it's a
point.
president and vice president that can go to council.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But they could extend that authority
To the
to the
board
committee,
liaison.
to the board liaison.
Well, and right
Now, in
now,
our case, the board liaison
it
happens to be
happens
the
to be one of
president.
those
So
people, right?
Yeah.
in that case, she can go, but we may not always have that luxury.
Right.
And
That's a good point.
And the other problem that
Well,
we
could
had
that
for
be
a couple of years is we
prerequisite
couldn't
that
get,
one of the
board
presidents or
liaisons to show
whoever
up
has
at the
that
meeting.
authority be.
And
that would be a problem.
and that is a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, we're very fortunate in what we have, because we do get good support, but that's Jim's point
Well,
there,
that
is
might
we
be
need
something
to.
the board should consider when assigning, is
Yeah.
that maybe in that thought process, that whoever has that ability from the board to reach out to council should be a liaison.
It should be
Because-
either president or vice president, because they got that authority.
So that as
Yeah.
this committee
Or-
deals with, we're more likely the ones would need the assistance of
Yeah,
council.
there's,
So I have
we're probably the only committee that
Right.
really
Other
needs
than
that.
our committee, but.
Yeah, they
um,
got a different set of rules.
Right.
Right,
Right.
but so, I mean, to me, what my suggest is, yeah, this should go in for review by the board.
Right.
And particular attention should be paid to the sentence relating to 4D.
Yeah.
As we understand it to me.
And as I said, the simple solution is assign a board liaison that has that authority. Then the board, the committee recommends, the board can go ahead and, the
Right.
liaison can go ahead and do it.
Right, right. I think that would,
I mean, we could hope
um,
it's unlikely that we would have counsel involved in succeeding litigation 2 years in a row, but you never know.
Yeah,
well,
life is tough.
the only other issue is that we have asked our liaison to go seek counsel for wording and stuff, but then do we ever hear back what that result was? I feel like once we requested, do we get to see what the council, recommends then? Or is it stopped back at the board portion and we don't know what
Yeah, I mean, it's,
council, I feel like there's no resolution on our end.
right.
Once we've made the request, did
Yeah.
we get any answers to our question?
As it applies to the recommended changes in the bylaws.
Right,
Right.
Which is where a lot of that came up.
Mhm.
If my recollection of what the board did was essentially consider 30 some odd suggested changes to the bylaws. They approved 28 of them, I think it was. And then it went over to council for appropriate draft. In other words, the board instructed the council to draft a resolution that meets what we wanted to meet. Now, should they have come back to us again? I don't know, but keep in mind, we were operating as a really tight deadline.
right, right.
So-
But we just don't know what the official
Oh, wait.
resolution of the wording that council says,
No,
here are
not
the
until you
terms
read
that
it.
you should be
Right.
consistent with.
Only until it
Only
came out.
when we read it
Right,
there.
That's right. Yeah, you're right.
So
You're
that
right.
we would know in the future ourselves what wording we might go ahead and actually
That's when the
suggest.
rate fell apart.
Was that in the packet?
What? Yeah, that was in the
Okay,
packet.
I guess I need to go get my packet.
I don't know if I have a spare. I have two properties, so I probably got
I think my packet's in Harper County. So,
I'll give you, there you go.
oh, what?
That's a spare copy.
Oh, you have?
I have 2 properties, so I got 2 of them.
Oh, okay.
But you only voted 4 times, right?
I voted early and I voted often. Because I wanted to support it.
Well, see, then that was my question. I saw some questioning of residents about, they didn't feel there was enough information included. And since this is the first time I'm looking at the stuff, to be able to vote on all of the changes that were, for, in this packet of voting for bylaws changes, how could there not be enough information if
If
they
you read-
received?
Yeah, one of the posts specifically said there's no before and after, but they're literally all here.
Right.
Yeah,
So I
This
don't-
is literally the before and
So
after
what
red
else
line
are they,
codes.
Yeah,
was that?
it's
person
all there.
looking
I don't know.
for?
They might not have understood what they were looking at.
And
that's part of the
I
problem.
know it was recommended to that person to go check out our
Everybody
meetings,
got it.
to
I got it.
online, to watch all the
coffee
special
bitters.
meetings that the board had.
And well, and you can download the copy of the bylaws
Right, so I
online.
felt like I just didn't understand from their perspective,
Yeah.
what more do they need?
They might not have understood what they were looking at here. That this represented, because some of these are additions, so it's not a red line. But then some of these you can clearly see
Maybe it's.
that it's an edit of the paragraph showing the new language.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, because it might not be red,
right.
but it is, so everybody uses that term, but then if you get this document, are you looking for red or are
Right.
you looking,
Yeah.
do you realize that crossed out part is what we're talking about?
And some of these things,
It's
some of these topics are not
Yeah.
super
there's-
easy to understand.
And there was a lot, and I think with all of the frustrations that everybody's feeling, most of them aren't even looking at it and reading it fully. So I'm going to be curious to see how this all pans out, if we really got true, valid input back from members, or did they just blanket say no for everything, not even really paying attention to details, But this is a very good document here to include with it, so I just wasn't sure if I was missing what that person was saying, why they didn't feel there was enough information, if they wanted more. And yet, like we said, it's on the website, it's, on the YouTube channel with all the meetings.
The only other thing I think that would have been nice, so I used to live in California, and in California, you vote on everything.
Yeah.
The the ballots.
I lived there for 25
Miles.
years, you're right.
You vote on everything. So you get a booklet like this, right? And it lists the issue, and then it lists the pro and the con.
Right.
Okay.
And so like on here, the pro is Board of Directors strongly urges OPA members to vote yes. It doesn't really explain why. But then there would be an opportunity for somebody representing the con to put in there why it's not recommended,
Right.
right? And you would have those two
Well,
Right.
should
pieces of
they-
input in order to make a decision. I mean, we don't do this all the time. This is a rare,
Right,
this
right.
is rare.
Well, and I
This is
think
right.
that's part of the
But,
problem,
yeah.
because it's not been a common thing for all of us to have to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody didn't want to take the time to go, oh my, this is a
Most-
lot.
Most people aren't going to read it. And that's
But
the problem.
There are people who've been very vocal
Yes.
about opposing some of these, and it would have just been nice if they'd have put that in writing. And, instead of just saying no, well, why no? Why is it that you oppose this? What's wrong with this particular,
Right.
this particular change?
Or are they just saying no because they just don't want to deal with any of it and are showing a point of view?
Right.
But if you look at, I would say 70% or more of those suggested amendments are really just sort of technical and conforming.
Right.
Right.
There's some that clearly have raised, the hair off the back of your neck sometimes. I get that.
There's a handful that are kind of contentious potentially, right?
But most of these are just really just sort of basic.
Cleaning up language.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, remember there was one about accounting manuals or personnel manuals or something like that. And it made it sound like there was a manual to be used as opposed to accepted practices manuals
Correct.
that might be available.
Correct.
Right.
And so it's just changing that language,
Yeah.
and nobody wants to hear that.
Is this the statement about the board of directors strongly agreeing to vote yes or no or whatever? Is that really needed in something like this? Or is this the same thing as if a nominating committee, like in PTA land, we might get a whole bunch of candidates which is very rare. But I would love it, but if we had, more qualified, candidates, we might say, we recommend this candidate for president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And then the other ones who don't make it onto that recommended list from the nominating committee, they would run from the floor. But, is that kind of a statement needed in these kind of documents for us? Or,
The explanation that I saw online, I don't know, I'm just telling you what I saw. One was in prior recommendations for bylaws changes and in other groups doing this, that sort of sentence has generally been included. The other thing that, the other point that somebody made a point of is that I think there's 28 of them.
Yeah.
All of these suggested changes were approved unanimously by the board.
Mhm,
There was no dissenting vote.
right,
Where there was controversy or disagreement, it was withdrawn, it was rewritten,
right.
and then it got approval, but well, anyway. So, I mean, that's the two answers I saw online.
Yeah, so we can have a referendum that the board did not initiate, that was initiated by petition.
Yeah.
Right.
And so theoretically, the membership could petition a referendum on a subject that the board doesn't support,
Right.
Well, that's,
but the membership is asking for it.
Mhm.
So,
that was Slobodan's case.
yeah, so the board could say, we're required by bylaws to submit this to a vote, but we don't support it.
Right.
Gotcha. So it could be word. Okay.
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
could be the other way around.
Mhm.
That's different than what
Well,
what
because I've
this is.
seen both comments too. Some people felt that the board shouldn't be weighing in on any of it at all because they don't
Right.
want to see what they're not, your explanation just explained why
Yeah.
it is,
Right.
it's fine to have it in there, you know? And it just so happens that they didn't oppose, the board didn't oppose any of the recommendation, changes and everything.
It just looks kind of weird that there's
It's
not an
just-
opposing
Right.
viewpoint, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
but as I say, those were the only two things that I saw online as
Right.
to explain.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to our.
So for us,
we can
we're
get to
now
the
up
adjournment.
to M08.
Right,
And on M08, that's what Jim wrote. Jim wrote
and
a,
he defined fairly well. Let me get the mic up again.
Yeah. I had one anyway.
Oh, you have one already. Okay, I have it someplace there. Yeah, and this MOA, if you look at it, it goes all the way back to February 19, the last time it was reviewed. It's been hanging that long because it's so cumbersome, nobody can deal with it. And what we're saying is Jim finally documented very clearly what he recommends, and I think that's the real option, is pick one of the options and go
either
with it.
get rid of it
Right.
entirety,
Right,
or if you're going to keep it, limit it to just the general manager's responsible documents.
And that's where it
remove
should-
all the rest of it.
right. It should be general manager.
So so for purposes of today, I think that it needs to be reviewed, it needs to be considered.
Right.
And for my future preference would be to get rid of it. Anytime that's an option to get rid of a resolution,
Yeah, I agree with that.
simplify. So I
I
agree.
mean, the general manager reports to the board and the board controls
Mhm.
that area, so why do you need it?
If it's not an issue that's gonna drive us into court,
Right.
if it's just gonna be something we debate amongst ourselves, but it's not gonna hurt anybody, it's not gonna drive us into court, then I say get rid of it.
Bob, I think you could say the last time this resolution was reviewed was in
1920, look at the
M08.
last column there where it says last review date.
November 2017. Yeah, you're right. It's 5 years.
And
Yeah, because
it keeps getting junk.
because it lists specific manuals.
Right.
So then in the theory is somebody has to go update those manuals. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's just not gonna happen. And it hasn't happened. And the problem is it becomes so cumbersome, nobody wants to deal with it.
right.
as long as there's a procedure to follow.
Why do you need the manual?
Right, that would be the way I would look at it.
Right.
But for our purposes today,
Kick it for review.
yes.
That would be my recommendation. But anyway, so that basically, that we don't have time to get into the rest of them now.
Well, we're coming up on 3, so
Yeah.
probably not.
I think we should,
I think that was a pretty good,
A lot done.
we went through all of his resolution or all of his priorities.
and he, and since it's recording, he has the notes.
You can go back, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so we should probably, do you want to annotate our decisions moving forward on here? You know, like, we agreed that this should be presented to the board for consideration for review.
Right.
Do we update those comments on here for that? On our
Uh,
status
Or
tracker
is
or
that
no?
Minutes, notes that we use.
Or is it just minutes?
I think we should just go into the minutes because all I'm doing is adding another line that says they're still hanging out there and what we're gonna do.
And the
So-
font's gonna get smaller.
So I can type this up in an email
Okay.
to send to the group and to Jim and say, we went through your priorities.
Right.
Here's
Okay.
where-
These are our
Do that.
thoughts.
That would be helpful.
And then Jim can turn that into,
And now I'll ask him whether he wants me to add a line to this. His form is getting longer as I keep
Right.
expanding because I'm trying not to take the history off anymore.
yeah.
Right,
So you can
right.
see how long it's been hanging.
Well,
Yeah, I mean-
especially if those of you with all this knowledge, we need to know the history.
And some of the,
But if you
yeah,
expect the
that's
rest
why
of
I'm
us
trying to leave
youngins
as much
to-
history. Let me tell you, slowly, slowly going downhill.
The truth of the matter is, you may think you're gonna be leaving in about in less than a year. Ain't gonna happen.
Everything's waivable.
Let's put it this way. Some of us would like the encouragement, if we're gonna continue and do our full terms and forever. We need help getting to know that history so that we can be the people that keep passing it on forward.
The
too.
real key is Jim.
Oh,
I-
I'm telling
I
you,
mean,
what he brings.
You
I've
two
been
are
here for 8
fair,
years,
though. You
But
two-
he's served his 8 years before and then he came back again. So he's got 16 years of history wrapped up.
Yeah, he knows
I
stuff.
got 8. I know where some of the,
We need him to
issues
make
are.
a bylaws memoir,
but
It'll be a movie someday.
Yeah.
theoretically, I mean,
Not a good one.
Only people like
Not
us
a good
would
one.
watch it,
Not a
right?
box office smash.
Yeah.
no, well,
One of those freebies on, yeah.
It's on Netflix streaming, yeah.
we want to do anything for the next meeting or let Jim just.
Well, I had a question then. What has typically been done for meetings? Like, are we still gonna stick with, and Jim probably has the input on what we should do, but, are we on a 1 month schedule now again versus every
Well,
2 weeks?
I
kind of
think
thing?
what we're up
Because
against is we're waiting to see what happens
The
with the
results on-
bylaws. Once that happens, we'll know whether this committee got to get involved because some get approved and some don't. I think there's going to be some exposure that we got to change a resolution or do something.
Well, I think just for scheduling purposes, we should just, for now, just assume, so that we were meeting the second Friday of every month, and that would be the 10th of June. And just for scheduling purposes, because my schedule is
Right.
ugly. Just,
It's ugly.
just put it down for the 10th of June, and then we can all talk about it later if it turns out that Jim or, whomever.
Do we want to do
We can-
another hybrid meeting in person? Well, because if they're gonna, Josh, do we know, are these meetings all gonna be, like, if we were all in person here, would you still be recording this then?
That would be the decision of the chair. I think it always is.
Okay.
Each committee chair can decide whether or not they want a meeting recorded. But we certainly have the capability in this room.
That's an interesting question, though,
Mhm.
because that probably should be consistent across
Right.
Ocean Pines.
Right, and all committees should be able to have their, if meetings are public,
They should be
you know what I mean?
recorded.
We should be able, if we can't make an in-person, all of us were in person and somebody else can't join us to sit and listen, there should be a way for them to be able to go and watch it. I
Yeah.
think that has been a good thing with the YouTube channel and
Yeah.
everything. And the way Josh puts everything up pretty quick, after it's recorded. But it would be nice if we had that resource for all meetings, because none of us know how Art discusses or the racket,
Yeah, it's a good,
Well, I mean, I sit on the golf advisory committee. They don't record anything. I mean, they just don't. I mean, and I don't mean that in an accusatory sense. I mean, they go through their business, they get an agenda, there's minutes produced afterwards. I mean, they're meeting what is required of them,
right.
but they don't record. From our point of view, as this committee, I think this committee should always be recorded. I mean,
We have a lot of
I
background.
mean, otherwise,
I think it helps in our
It's
particular.
the transparency. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no reason not to. My suggestion would be, we can set it for the 10th, tentatively subject to the call of the chair, and we
Right.
let Jim, when he comes up for air, is ready to go.
I agree.
He'll tell us what to do.
Right.
So
I
we
agree.
got tentatively set for June 10th at 1
Yeah.
o'clock.
I agree.
Okay.
In fact, see if we can get, now that when I first joined the committee, I was not here full-time. And so virtual was the best option for me to guarantee that I could be here consistently. Now that I am full-timer here for 3/4.
How are you gonna do
I
that with
don't
the
know,
school board?
I'm not opposed to doing this again, and I feel like I can hear pretty well in here, so.
If
that's why I
Josh
always
can
like
give us the
virtual.
backup. The real key is we got so many documents
Right.
that it
Yeah.
just gets cluttered. And if you have the ability, hey, Josh, is that something you can do?
I'm not sure I follow that question, but
Can you
again,
continue to share the documents on the screen for us during a meeting while you're recording it, like we've been doing virtually? Because in our particular committee, we have so many papers to print out. It's hard to keep track, but it's nice to be able to see one, right? Is that what
Yeah.
I'm interpreting?
Yes.
So the reality of it is, we can do the documents here ourselves. So Josh can give us control, and we could set the laptop here on the thing, and we could scroll through the documents ourselves instead of having Josh do it. I mean, that is an option. Josh doesn't have to be the one to do that.
Right.
But he
That's true.
You would have the ability.
He jumped right on that.
Remember that, please, if and when you join the board.
But Josh, we can continue to do the hybrid meetings, correct?
Absolutely. That's what
Okay.
this room is for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So in the event that you can't.
So do we need to reserve the room then now for next? June
Josh, can
10th?
you make sure we at least tentatively have a reservation for the 10th?
Or who does that? Who makes that reservation?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Are you gonna stop by and say hello and pick up your donut? Or donuts?
I'm in Salisbury right now, so I won't be making the trip today, but
That's why he needs to be.
you
promoted.
guys can have mine.
That's a long drive for a donut.
Yeah, that's too long.
Better
for
be a good
But
donut.
they're not that good.
They're not that good.
Hey, Josh, who in Ocean Pines controls Republic Trash?
Oh, yeah.
Republic.
Yeah, who's responsible? Who's the liaison?
There's no specific liaison, but any questions about that you could send to info@oceanpines.org, and we make sure it got routed the right way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because we've had a problem in our area, and everybody that called in got a different story. We got promises and nothing happened. They finally picked up the trash today, but it had been setting out since Tuesday
Really?
in the sanctuary. And I have it documented, so I was gonna drop it off, but I can email it too.
Send an email to Viola.
Yeah, I email John.
Yeah,
I would send it to info and it'll get to the right place. If you want to send it to me, I can filter it there too.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Do we need to?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Oh.
We need to formally.
Don't forget to
I wanted
adjourn the
to make a
meeting.
motion to adjourn, but I lost.
I'll second. I think we still have quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Yeah, we still have quorum, so.
All in favor?
We're going to adjourn the meeting now, so you can cut us off.